So it's the 20th of August and it's time for an allotment tour. And the allotment plot, I think, is probably at its peak in terms of lushness, but not in terms of productivity. I think we're now starting to see quite a few things dipping down in productivity, things like especially the beans and the purslane and things like that. Tomatoes are probably at about peak productivity right now. But then there's a lot of stuff on the allotment which is for autumn and winter, and so we're not harvesting that at all at the moment, so we're not seeing peak harvest by any means, but in terms of peak lushness I think we're there, and it's going to change a lot in the next couple of months. Pretty much everything that's there now will disappear and be composted or harvested, and I'll be replanting with all my winter crops. Now the back garden, by contrast, is now mostly replanted with winter crops, and the difference between the two is the back garden, most of the stuff grows without any protection at all, whereas on the allotment most of the stuff grows with some sort of protection. So maybe fleece, definitely coal frames, low tunnels, and the polytunnel that I'm sitting in at the moment. And that allows me to do the transition to autumn winter crops and spring crops a lot later on. So generally that starts about September time and really finishes about the middle of October, although I do some late successions as well that kind of go into November. But this is also a time when I'm hardly ever on the allotment. And so as a result of that, everything looks really scrappy. A lot of things are starting to die off. So there's lots of, when I'm on the allotment, basically I'm clearing beds and replanting them and harvesting. That's pretty much it. And so I'm not doing much weeding at the moment. I'm really concentrating on weeding only when I clear a bed and replant it. There's just not a lot of point trying to keep on top of it for the rest of the time. So let's take a look round. So we'll do the allotment first and then we'll take a look in the polytunnel. So we've got all of my autumn carrots along here. We did a bit of a disaster with the summer carrots, which got carrot fly, even though they're really high up on top of these IBC tanks. But fortunately I planted some summer carrots in the back garden as well, contingency, and they did great, so we've not been short of carrots. So I've got about 2-3 cubic meters of compost on the go, and this one's ready. So this is autumn, this one's next autumn, and that one's the autumn that follows. So we've got quite a lot of compost going here, and I've got quite a lot of sweet corn which is just ready for harvest. And interplanted actually into these sweet corn beds are winter squash, and so we've got some quite nice winter squash coming down here. Not, to be honest, a huge number. So I think probably in this whole bed down here, if I get 8-10 big winter squashes, I'll be pleased. And then down here we've got the Brussels sprouts. And they're doing pretty nicely. I'm quite pleased with these, and I will anticipate a comment that I know I will get, which is, they're uncovered, what are you doing about caterpillars and pigeons and all of that sort of thing? Well, for caterpillars at the moment I am keeping an eye on them, and so I generally get down to the allotment most days, not every day but most days, just for half an hour or so, and so I'm always just kind of looking on the back of a few leaves, not every leaf, just a few, to see if there's any evidence of any caterpillars. And I'm kind of looking for this, leaves that are being eaten by something like a slug or a snail. I'm trying to find the culprit. I can't find it right now. And just looking for leaves with holes in, which would indicate some caterpillars on the back of the leaf. So that's just generally what I'm doing. And that is okay, and I've cleared and removed and squashed quite a few like that. It only takes me a few minutes a day to find those. And if I see a lot of them though, which I haven't yet, then I will spray with BT and there's a link in the description below to how to source BT and use it, and videos and things like that. It is just a natural soil bacteria that can kill caterpillars, but you have to know how to use it. And then down here I've got some leeks, and they will grow on and be nice and big. And I've cleared the bottom leaves off these sprouts just to give the leeks a little bit of growing space there. And I will stay with the brassica theme, I think. So here I've got my colettes, and there is a cabbage white, probably laying eggs. Go. Right, so these are my favourite winter veg, growing nice and big. They've got a bit more growing to go, but already they're a good size, and that's what you're really looking for, because you want a stem that's really long, so you get all of these beautiful colettes growing on it, and are not really exactly the same as Brussels sprouts. The colettes will really fill that, jam-pack that stem out, and they kind of regrow as well once you've harvested the first batch, if the plant is big enough and strong enough and getting enough light. So they're doing pretty nicely, and again, no damage right now. Now, one of the things we're doing for pigeons is we do have some perennial kale plants which we leave for the pigeons to eat, and they're munching away on those at the moment, although I just noticed this, look, you see, so there's just a little bit of pigeon damage just on there. And what I might then do is just throw a net over the top of this, and that will protect them just fine. So I basically just look for the first bit of damage and then do something about it. But until then, the pigeons are just happy with the food that there is available on the allotment plot without damaging mine. So if you're interested in growing colettes yourself, or anything else that you see in this video, just take a look at the link in the description to my gardening book, scroll down to individual growing guides, and where I've written a guide you'll see it in green, and there's one there, the 4 colettes, and that's what they look like. These gorgeous little Brussels sprout like growths on the stem. Anyway, here's my growing guide, but you can't really get started until March next year now. And if you want details of the BT and basically how I deal with all the brassica pests, then go to the basics section and dealing with pests, and BT is in the biological controls section, and there's a video about it there and more details about how to use it. And as well, this is what I do about slugs and birds, and this is just the general advice section, and butterfly and moth caterpillars using nets and all of that. So then we've got some more Brussels sprouts, and I'm particularly pleased this year that I got a nice mix of the greens and the reds, although the reds don't look that red, but I think they probably get a little bit redder than this as we move into winter. And I've actually got a lot of little Brussels sprout plants which will be grown just for the leaves, because these leaves are absolutely gorgeous steamed, and they're my favourite of all of the brassica leaves. I much prefer them to cabbage and things like that, and they're actually, so far as I know, one of the healthiest of all of the brassica greens. And I've got some more colettes down there, and then bursting out of this cover, which will be moved fairly soon because some of the leaves are kind of getting a bit damaged. That's a purple sprouting broccoli bed, and there's a few different varieties in there. I think half of it are early varieties and the other half are lates. I think the late one is Claret, and I think there's early purple and maybe a little bit of summer purple as well. And then I think the final thing on the brassica front, apart from those which are coming out in a few days' time, are these. And again, these are just the later successional sowing of purple sprouting broccoli. Since we eat our purple sprouting broccoli and all the other veg that we eat pretty much fresh, we don't freeze very much of it, it's nice to have this successional sowing, because hopefully it will extend the season by a few weeks. I've already mentioned my autumn carrots. I think let's just have a quick skim around the plot and look at carrots. So these are the early winter carrots. They've got a little bit of downy mildew. There's a lot of new growth though that is fine. So there's some old growth with the downy mildew, but I'm not too worried about them. I have done a test harvest and they look pretty good. So even if these all died off with downy mildew now, I know I've got a decent harvest. So these are Touchon. These are the ones that we're going to be eating, as I say, sort of early winter. So December and maybe into early January. And then down here in another one of these deep frames, we've got the Eskimo, and these are the ones we're going to be eating in late winter, so January, February, but we'll also eat these through all the way through April. And these frames are a bit deep really for them. Unfortunately, in order to get successional sowings, I sometimes have to use suboptimal growing spaces, and this is one of them. But they seem to be fine. They're just a bit leggy, but the actual carrots, I've done another test harvest for these and they are just fine, so no problems there. And then I do like to have some really sweet carrots for my salad mixes, and so I've got this bed here and that bed there. Again, successional sowings of carrots which will not be big. You know, these will be nice, small, sweet, wonderful carrots after a few frosts in November and December and January. I get my first carrots of next year in about May time, and so I've got these in containers, and these are the ones we're going to eat all the way through April and maybe the first 1 or 2 weeks in May. So there's not a huge number, just a few, just to see us through that last month before the new season harvest arrives. And the way we do our new season harvest is we do them in containers in the polytunnel, and we sow them in November. And they're the ones we harvest, as I say, in May and June. And then we get our early main crop harvest in July and August, and then our main crops start kicking in September. So let's just take a look inside all these really ugly little low tunnels. And although I don't like them very much, what I do like is the fact that the peppers absolutely love them. Some really nice lush pepper plants here, and it's a bit hard for me to hold this up whilst also filming, so what I'm going to do now is just going to show you some screenshots from the various pepper beds with all the different varieties that we've got. Now we've got 4 of these low tunnels, and each of them's got different varieties of peppers in them, and we've been harvesting peppers since June from these low tunnels. We haven't got any in the polytunnel or in the greenhouse, and but the main harvest really has come in the last 3 weeks, so we've had a really abundant harvest. And I'll just pop up some pictures from our harvest tables to give you an idea of the sorts of things that we've been harvesting. But yeah, it's been a really good year for peppers so far, and the plants have got a lot of green peppers on them as well still, and so I'm really happy with them. And I've got some parsnips here, and these were interplanted into the onion bed, and the onions have all been harvested now. I'll show you those in a minute, but yeah, the parsnips have grown on really well, so it's been a great interplant, so I'm really happy with those. And then this is a strawberry bed, and this was interplanted with garlic, and again that worked out really nicely. And I've just potted on a whole load of runners, and so some of these are going to be going into hanging baskets in the autumn, and those will be for my early crop in the polytunnel. And so I'm really pleased with all of them. I only planted them last week and they're all showing some nice new growth, so that's great. And then in those containers down there along the back on the black plastic, that's where we've got our ochre. And this is the last few of our earliest dwarf French beans, and these are just going to have their last harvest this afternoon, and then these will be taken out next week. And in here we've got a whole range of winter kales and spring kales as well, because it's nice to plant them nice and small at this time of year so that they'll still be in great condition and growing strongly come spring. And I've just taken all my chili peppers out of the little greenhouse because it's currently drying the onions. And to be honest, I mean, it's a bit cold and wet for them out here, but I don't really care because we've harvested so many ripe chili peppers that we don't really care right now about any more. We've got more than enough. And then this was the main onion bed. And what I did with this bed, which is an interesting experiment, is I took leeks that were underplanted underneath the colettes and just separated them out and planted them as individual leeks. And they looked a real mess when I did it, but they're all recovering really nicely, so I'm quite confident now that we're going to get a nice leek crop from here, as well as the leeks that are underplanted. And maybe you can see down there that maybe not. I have a lot of leeks underplanted under the brassicas. And then I hardly ever direct sow, but just occasionally when a bed comes free slightly earlier than I expected. In this case it came free 2 weeks before, so I thought, well, I haven't got anything to go in it, so I'll just direct seed into it. So I direct seeded radishes, turnips, spring onions, carrots, more carrots, and my first sowing of true spinach. And in a way this demonstrates why I generally don't direct seed, because of just a kind of patchy germination. And I have got some spare spinach plants which I'll use just to fill out this bed, but anyway, it's just fun sometimes to direct seed, but generally speaking, I recommend module sowing and transplanting. These are my late strawberries, pretty much finished now, and I've got some elephant garlic transplanted into here. I've left some of it in so that it grows into what will be a kind of leek crop in early spring. And I do need to take those seed heads off though. And I've got some apples. Now this is the first time I've had apples on this tree, and there's a few got grubs, but I don't mind that. I've got a knife, and looking quite nice. I did try one the other day, it's not ready yet. I've got a cherry tree here and another apple tree here, which doesn't look quite as tempting. So here we've got the main asparagus bed, and I actually interplanted down here a huge number of spring onions, and we've just finished harvesting those. They actually did really well. So when I planted them, obviously this asparagus was really low down to the ground, and I just progressively harvested them as the asparagus was allowed to grow up, and it kind of just held the spring onions in abeyance. So rather than bulbing up too big or growing too big, because of the shade from the asparagus, they just didn't grow that much. and as a result we've got a really nice spring onion harvest over a really long period of time. So this was a bed of shallots, and I've just replanted it to lettuce. So these are the lettuce that will be eaten all the way through autumn until about the middle of November, when the main lettuce beds in the Polytunnel come ready. And this is going to be the first overwintered spinach bed, and at the moment it's just got a few beetroot in it and a few kales. We don't need these kales anymore, we've got plenty back home, but you know, there's no point taking them out until I need to replant them, and so I'll be replanting these in about 2 weeks time. And then most of these low tunnels with the peppers in will get replanted to lettuces and spinach, and in the end I should have about 4 beds like this size of spinach and about 2 of lettuce, and then, as I said, most of the polytunnel goes down to lettuce. So there's only a few things left. So this is golden purslane. It's pretty much finished now. Quality's degraded no end. It's kind of what happens when we get into our cold August. So that is coming out next week, and that's going to be pak choy and tatsoi. And then finally we just take a quick look at the beetroot. So this is our storage crop of beetroot. All the beetroot we're currently eating is back at home, and I'm pretty pleased with the size of these. And these will be harvested, normally actually harvesting in October, but I think these will be ready for harvesting middle of September time probably. They're doing pretty well. There's some big ones here. You don't need to worry about large beetroot being tough. It's mainly about how long it's been growing, and so these are young plants. Although the beetroot are big, the plants are young, and so the beetroot will be fine. And some golden ones down here, again really good size, exactly the sort of size we want for storage. Although we like medium-sized onions, we quite like large beetroot. We find that they store just fantastically well. In fact, it was only last week that we harvested the last of our beetroot from store, and we just store it in wood chips, damp wood chips, and it was just great. So yeah, this is our storage crop. Let's just have a quick look at the drying room. So this is where we've got most of our drying going on, mostly onions in here, although we have also got some shallots, and every shelf is full right now, and some of these at the bottom are still a bit wet, and some of these are a bit rotten, but not many, so I'm quite pleased with these. These are looking, oh yeah, they're looking really great. And we've got another room similar to this one back at home, and that's full of shallots and onions as well. And I've just got a few more onions here in the Polytunnel, which are also nearly dry. I'll be really pleased to get all these onions processed and get some space back. Let's have a quick look inside the Polytunnel. So I've got only really one good cucumber left here, but I've got 2 cucumbers in the conservatory as well. But this one's still growing really strong. We're getting 5 or 6 cucumbers off it a week. And then this one has got some sort of virus, I don't know what it is. It is still kicking out a few cucumbers, but I think I'll just take it out. And we've got some, mostly in here now we've got tomatoes. So we've got plenty of cherry tomatoes, and we're harvesting these a couple of times a week, but they're pretty good. I'm pretty happy with the yield off these so far. In fact, we're kind of, I would say, overwhelmed with tomatoes, but that is a kind of good place to be, isn't it? So there's just a few of them splitting, we're just eating those fresh, but pretty much good results from the tomatoes so far. And then these are the cooking tomatoes down here. There's a few of them fallen off. I've just left those to ripen, but they're just starting to ripen now. And there's going to be a lot of those as well. And we're pretty much at capacity now with passatas and ketchups and jams, chili jams and things like that. So goodness knows what we're going to do with all these tomatoes, but as I said, nice problem to have. I have been experimenting with all sorts of different things interplanted into these beds, and to be honest, I've not really been very happy with it. I think the Polytunnel is great for tomatoes in summer, but it's pretty much too hot for anything else apart from ginger. And I am pretty pleased with the way this ginger's going. It's not getting as much sun as I'd like because I've got this table like stacked up with stuff, but the actual ginger roots under here are looking great. So I don't know whether you can see them now, but quite nice. So anyway, we'll see what these are like, but if these do okay, then I might grow a bit more ginger in here next year. So in about 7 weeks time, all these tomatoes will be out of here, apart from the ones in containers, and the cucumbers will be out as well, and everything will be tidied up and nice and clean and well ordered again. And all of this is pretty much going to be initially lettuces and spring onions, and I'll have some shelves in here with overwintering brassicas, things like little spring cabbages, cauliflowers, calabrese, romanesco cauliflowers, those sorts of things. And then progressively through May, all of those will get replanted into the lettuce beds. Lettuce beds will stay until the brassicas overpower them, but by May time, all of this will be full of harvest ready cauliflowers, calabrese, etc. And then when we harvest all those, back go the tomatoes again. So it's a nice succession. So I did mention that I've got these perennial kale plants which the pigeons absolutely love, and this is the one that I've left in, and the pigeons just come and sit on top of that and chew away at it. And we don't have a huge number of pigeons, fortunately, so they seem to be really quite territorial. So the few that I've got that come to my plot tend to eat this perennial kale plant, and then they leave this one alone, which is its replacement. And down here I've got a plum tree, an apple tree, some blackberries, more apples, and another perennial kale. So that's the tour over with. And if you want any more details about the way that I garden, I do recommend you take a look at my free ebook. There's a link to it in the description below. It's a work in progress. There's a lot of content there, but it will always be a work in progress because I'm constantly updating it, refining it, and responding to queries and questions from people. And I really like to do that. So I get a lot of questions obviously in the comments on these videos, and my preferred way really to answer a lot of those comments is to update sections in the book or write new sections and then put a link in the comments to those. So that's the way a lot of the content is driven. So please do ask questions. And if you want to support me in the creation of this book and also my apps and databases and all this video content and my allotment diary and all of that, then you can do that via the Buy Me a Coffee site, and there's a link to that in the description below, but there's no obligation at all to do that. You don't get anything for doing it other than giving back. My name's Steve, this is the Seaside Kitchen Garden and Allotment channel, and I'll see you soon.